What's up, Jacob?
What's up, Jimmy?
All right, so this week, not a lot has happened in the NFL this past week, so we're just going to continue talking about rating each of the teams A to F based on their offseason moves to this point, and we'll be moving on to the AFC, and we'll also be touching a little bit on the Deshaun Watson situation. Anything else you want to add, Jacob?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, another slow week in the NFL offseason, as any offseason's prone to. So, not super surprised there.
That's for sure. So we'll be starting in the AFC North. And since you're a Steelers fan, we'll start with the Steelers, and we'll let you take the first shot.
Yeah, so Steelers haven't really done much so far. They've already, I think they've extended Juju Smith-Schuster, so that's obviously a good move to keep him in there. They restructured Big Ben's contract. I think what's going to determine their final grade is going to be if they address that offensive line and get a running back in the draft. So that's going to be a good indicator of how they do this offseason. Last year, they had the worst running game in the league, and that really limited their ability on offense, especially to throw the ball down the field because the other teams would pack the line of scrimmage. Because they knew they weren't going to run, they would pack the line of scrimmage and have a bunch of safeties playing deep. So it really limited the Steelers' ability to move the ball down the field during especially the last half of last season. So that's why James Conner, the Steelers aren't going to re-sign him, and they're going to look for running back help and offensive line help in the draft. So once we see what happens in the draft, we'll have a better indication. But as of now, I'll give them a C+ because they were able to restructure Big Ben's contract and retain the services of Juju Smith-Schuster.
Okay. I would agree with that rating. But I just want to backtrack a little because when we were first having these discussions, you wanted nothing to do with Juju Smith-Schuster remaining on the team. You thought it was a bad move to re-sign him, and now that they've re-signed him, it seems like your mind has changed. So what changed for you since the last time we had this conversation about Juju?
I think ultimately, anytime someone wants to continue to play for your organization, you have a homegrown player, I think it's important to retain them. And I don't think, given what the market's been looking like for wide receivers, he got less than Kenny Golladay, I believe. So I think he's worth that at least. And so I think what's more important to me when they get these players is the price at which they're getting them rather than the player themselves. Obviously, you want to get the best players possible. I'm not saying that, but to overpay for people is the worst thing you could do with a hard salary cap. And so I think they got Juju Smith-Schuster for a reasonable rate that is aligned with the value he brings to the team. So I think that to me is why I'm okay with a move, and I'm glad they got him back because they got him back at a reasonable value for what he is. They didn't overpay for him. And the same obviously goes for Big Ben. They restructured his contract, so got him at a decreased rate as well.
Right, so you were just worried about Juju being paid too much to be on the team rather as opposed to just, being on the team in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, I mentioned that earlier with the running game. It really made it hard for all the Steelers receivers last year. And, Juju Smith-Schuster was no exception. But my biggest concern always when it comes to retaining players is going to be how much they get paid rather than, obviously he's a pretty solid player, but they didn't break the bank on him.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I would rate the Steelers a B- for their moves this offseason, restructuring that Big Ben contract because it was going to be like the biggest contract in the league, like the biggest salary hit, and then re-signing Juju I feel like was a good move. We're yet to see what they're going to be doing with James Conner. Like you said, the run game was terrible last season. I don't know if the blame could be put on James Conner or the O-line. So we'll see what the Steelers decide to do in that move. But for now, I'll give them a B minus for restructuring Big Ben and then re-signing Juju. Moving on to the Browns, I haven't seen much of them making moves in this offseason, but they don't need a lot to do. I mean, they went to the playoffs last season. They're a pretty solid team. They can make a few tweaks here and there, but I don't think anything really needs to be done with the Browns. I'm going to give them a C since there hasn't been a lot of movement, but I feel like there shouldn't be a lot of movement for that team.
Right, I agree. I think the Browns are in a pretty good spot. A lot of players that were young players 2 years ago started to emerge as star players last year, and that's what made them a playoff team. And I think those guys are going to continue to get better. And ultimately, the Browns are going to begin to be a contender in the AFC North, which they haven't been for a long time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been the Steelers and Ravens division for the past decade
right.
or so.
Totally.
Speaking of the Ravens, we'll be moving on to them. Not a lot of big moves for them either this past offseason, and similar to the Browns, they went pretty deep in the playoffs last year. There's not a ton that they need to fix, but based on there being no action, I'll also be giving them a C.
Yeah, I'll actually give the Ravens a C minus. They lost Mark Ingram so far, which he's a veteran presence, a good leader on that team. And if you're a Ravens fan, you have to be thinking along the lines of when's this team going to put everything together? We thought the last couple of years they've had a legitimate chance as a Super Bowl contender, and they just couldn't put it all together. And so, every year that they don't get it done, their players are getting older. That defense is getting older. So it'll be interesting to see if they can start to string things together this year, or risk being another kind of really good team that never was able to put it all together in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's very valid.
So I'll give them a C minus.
For sure. And then moving on to the Bengals, they were a terrible team last season. They haven't really done anything in the offseason to help Joe Burrow. They lost A.J. Green. They need to help Joe Burrow. They need to bring him more weapons. They need to do something to help him build that team so that can actually be a playoff team built to his caliber. But they're not doing any of that. And because they lost A.J. Green and haven't done anything to help build up an offense for Joe Burrow, I'm going to be giving the Bengals a D.
Yeah, I think the Bengals need to be more intentional now about building an offensive line for Burrow because of the fact that Joe Burrow, when he came into the league, was already a really old player. I think he got drafted at 24. He's a graduate senior, and so the window that they're dealing with Joe Burrow is a lot smaller than you would if you got a quarterback that's 21, 22 years old. So I think it's important now to get an offensive line around him before a career becomes wasted. I think that's happened so many times. Is guys are left when they get drafted by a really bad team. They're left without a good offensive line for the first 3 or 4 years of their career, and then you look back at the end and you're like, oh my gosh, they never gave this guy the line he deserved, and for that reason he never became the player that he was supposed to be. So I think there's got to be a degree of urgency in getting him the pieces he needs to be successful, otherwise he's going to be injured all the time, like what happens to young quarterbacks that don't have good offensive lines time and time
Absolutely. Again. So we'll be shifting to the AFC East now. We'll start with the Patriots. The Patriots started this offseason by re-signing Cam Newton, which at that point seemed like a very bad idea since he didn't really do anything for that team. But then Bill Belichick started making these crazy moves, bringing in weapons for Cam Newton. And I believe that, the staff that they brought in to help out is definitely going to help their team be a lot better than they were last season. So based off the Patriots moves this offseason, the receivers they brought in and such, I will be rating them with a B.
Yeah, I think they've gotten a lot better. A lot of good signings, a lot of reclamation projects they've took upon themselves, and so that's going to be good for the future and building players around him.
Absolutely.
So I'll give. I keep forgetting to give a grade. I keep talking about forgetting to give a grade. So I'll give him a B as well.
For sure. We'll move on to the Jets. They just gave up Sam Darnold and a move that nobody saw coming. And they haven't really done anything other than that. They were a bad team last season. They haven't done anything to improve that team. So, we'll probably be seeing more of the Jets in the draft as opposed to just like these crazy offseason trades and such and acquisitions. But based on the Jets just, dwindling, I will be giving them a D for their offseason moves.
Yeah, I'm just going to give them an undecided just because, that their future is completely dependent on the draft, and there's not really any players for them to sign until they figure out who they're going to get through the draft.
Right.
So I'll just give an NA to them.
Okay. And then we have the Dolphins. They were a pretty solid team last year. Like I was saying in a previous episode, they came out of nowhere and made the playoffs. So they're doing pretty well for themselves. They're another team that we're probably not going to see a lot of movement in the offseason. We'll be seeing more of them in the draft. So just based on that alone, I'll be giving them a C.
Yeah, I'll give them a C too. They've done that much so far, and they're already, again, just like we mentioned with the Browns, already a team that's on the up and up. And so each year their young players are going to get better and better, and they have a lot of draft picks too, so they should be able to build well through the draft.
Absolutely. Moving on to the Bills, they're another team that really didn't need to do much to their team. Their team almost made a Super Bowl run last season. I feel like they definitely still have that level in them. They've remained complacent, but they haven't really need to make any big moves, like I stated. So I'll just be giving them a C, but it's not like a bad C. It's just, they've been stagnant in the offseason, and that's fine with them because they don't really need anything splashy.
Right, yeah, I'll give them a C as well. They brought in Mitch Trubisky as a backup quarterback, which is not too bad of a move. And they just don't really need very much on that team. They're already in a good spot and already are a Super Bowl contender before the season starts.
Right. So we did the AFC North and East. We'll be moving on to the AFC South. Let's just start with the Texans, since they're going to be the hot topic for moving forward. They've made some pretty bad moves this offseason. I remember they lost, no, not this offseason, but in the past offseason, they gave up DeAndre Hopkins. They brought in some running backs. I believe they brought in Mark Ingram and somebody else, slipping my mind right now, but the Texans haven't made the moves that they've needed to make to be a contending team. They're struggling. They're losing Deshaun Watson, and we'll be getting into more of that situation later. But I don't think the Texans have made the moves that they've needed to make, and I'll be giving them an F.
Yeah, I'll give the Texans an F as well. They've just made some terrible organizational moves.
You're breaking
they let
up.
J.J. Watt. They let J.J. Watt go without getting any compensation for him. Yeah, I hear the beeping. I don't know what that is.
Sorry, you were breaking up for that. Could you repeat that?
Jacob? Yeah, I just mentioned that the Texans, I will give them. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, so I just mentioned with the Texans, I'll be giving them an F grade. They've made some terrible organizational moves this offseason, letting J.J. Watt go for free and just completely alienating their star quarterback, Deshaun Watson, and then obviously Deshaun Watson and these rape allegations. So, yeah, they'll get an F from me for this offseason.
Yeah, J.J. Watt, that was the move that was slipping my mind for whatever reason. Yeah, losing J.J. Watt's definitely a fat L to take for a team. So we'll be moving on to the Colts. I believe the Colts were a pretty solid team last year, but they definitely have some work that they need to do. I think they'll be a team that's, building more in the draft. So for now, I'll just be giving them a C.
Yeah, I like what the Colts have done so far. They got Carson Wentz for pretty cheap. So I'm going to give them a C plus. Actually, they got Carson Wentz for a really reduced price, and people forget that he was an MVP 2 years ago. So I still think he has a lot left in the tank, and hopefully a change of scenery is going to do him well as a starting quarterback for the Colts following the retirement of Phillip Rivers.
Right. Another trade that completely slipped my mind. I'm losing it today. Yes, Carson Wentz is now on the Colts. I think that the Eagles actually got the winning hand in that trade. But we'll be moving on to the Titans now. I think I'm going to let Jacob start off with each of the trades now, just in case there's things that I may be forgetting. So, Jacob, take it away with the Titans.
Yeah, the Titans, not much has happened for the Titans this offseason. They pretty much stayed pat, so for that reason, I'm just going to give them a C.
Yep, the Titans, no big moves this offseason. They'll be getting a C from me as well. Moving on to the Jaguars, they brought in a running back.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you can go for it.
So the Jacksonville Jaguars got Mark Ingram, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so the Jaguars acquired Mark Ingram, so that's a good veteran presence alongside presumably what they're going to get in Trevor Lawrence next year. But I think their draft grade's going to go up a lot once they get Trevor Lawrence. But as of now in the offseason, not much has happened, so I'm just going to leave them with to be decided as their offseason grade thus far.
Right. The Jaguars are going to be one of the biggest teams to be watching in this upcoming draft, but for now we'll just be giving them out a C since that there'll be more. Their moves will be coming in the draft. Final division we have is the AFC West. We'll go ahead and start with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, with the Raiders, I don't think they've done much either this offseason thus far. So with that being said, we'll just wait to see what happens with the draft. So we'll give them just a C for now as an even grade.
I agree with that. I'll be giving them a C as well. Moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs, reigning Super Bowl defeatees or losers or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, so the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe they made some moves to improve their offensive line so far. That's another team there's not a ton that needs to be done to improve upon. So I think for that reason I'll give them a C plus by improving their offensive line. They're already a really good team, so some small moves is all they really need to make this offseason.
See, I'm gonna agree with you there that they didn't need to do much, but giving them a C, I feel like is a huge disservice to the fact that they did take care of the one need that tore them apart in the Super Bowl. You know, they made it to the Super Bowl. They did pretty well for themselves last season. The one thing they struggled with in the Super Bowl was having no line to protect Patrick Mahomes, and so he just got tore up by that Buccaneers defense. So them improving that O-line goes a very long way for me, and that was the one critical component that they needed to fix, and because of that, I'll be giving them an A for this offseason.
Gotcha.
And then we'll be moving on to the Broncos, and then finally we'll have the Chargers.
Yeah, so the Broncos, I haven't heard much from that team as well so far this offseason, so I'm just going to give them a C as well.
See, for me, the Broncos are another team that really needs to improve, and so them not making any moves in this offseason is a huge disservice to the team and to the fans. It's a struggling franchise, and they have a lot of work to do, and because they're just remaining complacent as of right now, I'll be giving them a D.
And then last but not least, the
most irrelevant
the understudy
team
in LA. The understudy in LA, the Los Angeles Chargers. Jimmy, what grade do you give the Los Angeles Chargers for this offseason?
The Los Angeles Chargers, the team without a fan base. San Diego hates them. LA roots for the Rams. What do you do with them? Anyways, the Chargers, they're a decent team. They have a really good quarterback right now, and they can definitely help to build around him. But for right now, I'll just be giving them a C.
y'all getting to see as well. They haven't made any moves so far, but Justin Herbert will be a year older, and it's going to be exciting to see what Justin Herbert's able to do this upcoming season. He's a really good, really talented quarterback, and so hopefully they can give him some good help in the draft this year.
Absolutely. So we finished off rating each of the teams. NFC we did last week. This week we did AFC. We'll move on to the Deshaun Watson situation that just seems to be escalating as time progresses. I just want to start by saying that we like to remain impartial in this. We don't want to pick a side until the evidence is actually out there. The American justice system is built on the fact that people are innocent until proven guilty, and that's not to put down these women and saying that they're not telling the truth. It's just not up to us to decide or make opinions or pick a side in this situation until the police they do their research and they give their findings to the courts, and then it's handled by the U.S. justice system. So that's all I want to say on the matter before more evidence comes out and more until this goes to court.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Jimmy. There, we're just gonna wait and see what happens. Still, nothing's been decided. Nothing has really come out new, other than the fact, obviously, there's a large number of witnesses now. So we're just here waiting and seeing, just like the rest of America is, to see what ends up happening to Deshaun Watson.
Absolutely. So those were the two topics that we needed to cover this week. Is there anything else that's on your mind before we close off today, Jacob?
No, I think that's it. I think, obviously as we approach the draft, we'll be, I think Jimmy and I would love to put a mock draft together as we close in on the draft day. Appreciate everyone that's been tuning in with us weekly, and we look forward to connecting with you guys next week. And again, if there's any things you'd like for us to talk about, put it in the comments, message us on Facebook, and we'll definitely cover that in the coming weeks. But appreciate it, and look forward to connecting with you guys next week.
Just one quick update before we officially sign off. I know previously we talked about a fantasy football league and how we'd be inviting you guys, the fans, to join our league. Just a little more detail about that. We still don't have an official date or official details about how that's going to look, but we do want to let you know that that's going to be happening after the NFL draft. We're not going to put together a fantasy league until the NFL draft has happened and until more time has passed for the teams that are going to be making offseason moves to make those moves.
Right, absolutely.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jacob.